Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of the GD Report. I am D,
And I'm G.
and
Yep.
we are broadcasting from the great states of Oklahoma and Colorado.
Yep.
And bringing you our and correct opinions. No other opinions are correct other than ours. Just kidding. We welcome thoughts. We welcome comments. We welcome questions. Be sure and follow all your favorite podcasting softwares and channels, and give us some feedback if you like it what you hear. So we've got an action packed lineup tonight because the news just keeps on keeping on. There's not, you could yearn for those days between a Bill Clinton and a George W. Bush, or a Bill Clinton and a George H.W. Bush presidencies, where the lame duck session consisted of a bunch of renaming of postesses and that kind of stuff, and just last wrap up of and maybe some presidential pardons, which we could have some of those coming up in a few weeks as well. But that kind of thing. But now everything is pretty much gone into a free fall of denial by the Trump administration and the Trump campaign, which pretty much the same thing, where
Yep.
they want to deny the results of the election. In the next week, we should start seeing states certify their elections. But in particular, we've got a couple states that we want to talk about tonight because there's some challenges. G-Man, why don't you tell us what's happening up in the great state of Wisconsin?
Um, Mr. Trump is trying to steal the election, as his supporters are often shouting, "Stop the steal." He basically, I'm sorry, I got Wisconsin mixed up with Michigan.
Well, that's coming up next, yeah. But Wisconsin, we've got the two lawsuits
Right.
that have been filed to challenge the results, and I think they're seeking a recount, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
In
of two
Dane,
counties, right?
Dane and Milwaukee counties, which are the two most populous counties. They can obviously contain the city of Milwaukee and Madison. And also might mention in the state of Wisconsin, the two counties with the highest concentrations of African American voters as well.
Right. Yeah. So this Trump campaign strategy now is to try and disenfranchise as many black voters as they can. They are trying to keep majority of the votes from Michigan and Detroit from being certified, and that may be a moot effort here, and we'll find out in just a second. But yeah, I think what they're trying to do is just pick out anywhere where a large number of black people voted in states that Trump lost, and they're trying to figure out a way to get those votes tossed out so that they don't count and Trump can carry the state. If that doesn't work, what they're doing is they're bringing in state legislators. Well, the first thing they did was
Now you've shifted to Michigan, right?
no, I thought that was Wisconsin. They were bringing in the state legislators, right?
No, that's Michigan.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, I will cover that in a minute.
Now you can go ahead. That's pretty much basically what's happening in Wisconsin right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any more glaring than that. You start seeing what's happening there, what's happening in the state of Georgia, and to your point, we're seeing where basically and it's not just Trump. Obviously, it's his sycophants, his campaign workers, the dark vampire lord Rudolph Giuliani, and also Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, the chief water carriers in the Senate for him, where they're not even really trying to hide it and say, hey, let's have a full recount. Now they're doing the hand recount in Georgia right now, but it's my understanding that after that they're seeking possible machine recounts as well. And
Right.
so it's like delay, sue. Every lawsuit they've had, with the exception of their campaign poll watchers being allowed to stand, I think, 2 feet closer. Every other suit that they file's been thrown out.
Right.
And so their whole goal is to try to, if they can push off the certification of these states, so that
Right.
those aren't certified. And they're not challenging any of the states that Trump won, by the way. It's
Right.
only the states that he lost.
Yeah, and so they think by pushing off the certification process that will leave those states in limbo, and the legislature will then appoint pro-Trump electors to go to Washington on the 14th, and where the real presidential election takes place, and they'll vote to install him as the incumbent and for a second term. I think if that happens, and I think there's a good chance it could happen, given all the crazy things that have happened in 2020, I think there'll be a major civil war in the country.
I mean, I don't know anything else that could happen, to be honest. I mean, there's no way that when the majority of the voters and the Electoral College voted, and of course, Electoral College hasn't voted yet, but with the votes, the way they broke down, that the Electoral College should be an Electoral College win for Biden, and then almost 80 million votes for him, 6 to 7 million more votes than Trump got.
Right.
People not being recognized. I mean, we talked about it before the election, but we're really on the precipice of something really bad for our country. And the fact that the other party won't accept the fact that they lost, and just wants to just declare, "Hey, we're the winners."
Right.
And you've alluded to it already, and we talked about it. And I know it's easy sometimes to get those two states mixed up, but in the state of Michigan, what happened in Wayne County, in Detroit, where the electors have now, or the campaign, I forget their exact title. They're basically the poll canvassers, I believe, and there's a 4-vote committee, 2 Democrat, 2 Republican, to certify the election.
Right.
They voted initially not to certify. The 2 Republicans did, even though they had no reason not to. There was no proof of fraud. There was no proof of anything. They just voted not to. And I think it's the first time in the history of Wayne County that they've done that.
Right. I think you're right on that.
And then they decided to change their votes and vote to certify. So it was went from 2 to 2 to 4 to nothing to certify. And the deadline was Tuesday. And now that the deadline has passed, we find out that the 2 Republican members have submitted affidavits that they wish to rescind their votes and to vote not to certify. And we know at least one member of that committee was contacted by phone by President Trump.
Yeah, and I think that's where that all comes from. I think Trump contacted him. I mean, he first tweeted out in support of them withholding their votes to certify, not realizing that they had actually flipped back and were going and voted to certify. So his tweet was a little late, but it was definitely in support of them. And then now that they've certified, he called her, and I'm sure they discussed strategy for how they could pull back their votes and get that vote not certified. But the Secretary of State says the vote's in, and that county has approved their election results, and the state approval is going to go on as regularly scheduled. So I think sometime next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, we should see Michigan certify their results for the election, and it'll go for Biden.
Now, that being said, and I agree with you, I think the timeline's dead on what's going to happen. And thank goodness that we have a Michigan governor and attorney general who will Secretary of State as well, who will stand up for what's right as opposed to what the mob rule wants, which is funny considering that you would think that the mob would say we want majority rules, but they're basically saying, hey, we're not going to take it. We think the people who got less vote should win. That's what we feel like should happen.
Right.
But Trump is also invited tomorrow to a meeting at the White House, members of the Republican members of the Michigan legislature, which, as you've alluded to already, everybody knows what his end goal is for that. He's not inviting them up there to talk about who's going to have a better season, Michigan or Michigan State.
Right.
He's inviting them up to say, as we've seen, and as Adam Schiff and the other House prosecutors talked about during the impeachment trial, this is going to be the quid pro quo. This is going to be you pick a new set of electors who will vote for me, giving me the state of Michigan, and they'll need at least one more state, by the way,
right,
for that to happen. But you do that for me, and I'm gonna do this for you. I don't know what the pro is, quid pro quo, what he's going to offer them, but I don't see him. I don't see him even being shy about doing it because there's been
Yeah.
no consequences of him doing this in the past. He's offered it to foreign leaders. He wasn't able to. He tried to kill Joe Biden's nomination before it ever even happened by trumping up uh, things about Hunter, and who knows what he'll offer him, but he's going to offer him something, and I'm not going to be shocked if they don't come out of there changing their tune. The leader of the legislature in Michigan, the Republican leader, had said this week that there would be no new electors picked by the legislature,
Right.
that they would go by the results, and the way he saw the results is that Joe Biden was going to be the winner. That's what he said, like on Monday.
Right.
Now, it's Thursday. Tomorrow's the meeting there. Friday, I believe that man is attending the meeting. So we're
Right.
going to see what happens.
Yeah. Um, like I said, this country is teetering on the precipice of, some major conflicts coming. And I certainly hope it doesn't come to violence, but we've already seen violence in some of these protests leading up to the election. And I think that if on January 20th, it's Donald Trump standing there with his name on the Bible, that we are definitely going to see an outpouring of violence, and this country could be split apart in ways we haven't seen since the Civil War of the 1860s.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely headed that way. And the thing is, you see the way that just out and out denialism of the truth is really seeding a lot of this. You see the in Michigan, where they say, "Oh, this was a stolen election. This is fraud." All these things have really fomented into, and we saw the arrest about a month and a half ago of the. I'm not going to call them militia members because I think militia members is too kind of a term. The domestic terrorists.
Right.
Our country came in and said they were going to kidnap one of our governors and execute them. What would we think? We would think those were terrorists. And so that's what these folks are. But more details came out in one of the court filings that they had planned we were going to try and execute elected officials in the state of Michigan. And so this type of denialism breeds this type of alternate reality where people think that they should be able to take the law into their own hands, and it's a scary time for our country right now. That also leads to another topic in the state of Michigan, where talk about scary things. Matthew Stafford's wife, Holly, I believe is her name, had a pretty good rant on social media today where she talked about she's tired of living in the dictatorship known as Michigan because of Gretchen Whitmer's rulings to basically stay at home, wear a mask, all the things, because again, we're talking about election, but the big dereliction of duty in this whole thing is that President Trump continues not to even say anything about the pandemic and about the cases are rising back up. They're spiking all over the country.
Yep.
He tried to come out the other day. The only statement he's had since Joe Biden was declared the winner is he tried to come out and do a touchdown dance on the fact that there's a potential vaccine now. But other than that, no statements on what to do, still no national policy. And so it's leaning on these state governments to come up with this. But, Holly Stafford, she had this, she just talked about her outrage of all the small businesses being shut down and not being able to shop and not being able to help people and people not being able to work. So she did all this, by the way, from the parking lot of a Target store. So I know that she's very concerned about the small businesses by shopping at Target.
Right.
And also, I would imagine that she's so concerned about businesses surviving that she would be on the phone to Mitch McConnell, right? Demanding that a CARES Act be passed. The one that was passed in June by the House of Representatives that would have provided more federal funding for small businesses to survive, would have allowed an extension in unemployment benefits, federal dollars to be able to help people get through this pandemic. I'm sure she's all in favor of that, right? I mean, she wouldn't possibly be against that at all, since she's so outraged by the quote unquote dictatorship that she's having to live under.
So here's exactly what she said, and she said it in a video that she posted to Twitter. I'm so over it. I'm over living in a dictatorship that we call Michigan. I understand there's a pandemic, and I understand it's very scary. I'm scared of it too. If you are at risk, do not leave your house until there's a vaccine. But shutting down all these small businesses, things that people have worked their life for, shutting them down again is not the answer, because they will not make it. So once we are able to leave our house, once the dictatorship decides to let us have some freedom, there will be nothing left. Believe me, I know these people, there's people out there that are stating, that's really ignorant of you. How could you say that? Listen, I know not everybody's going to agree with me. Not everybody's going to agree with me with my every move I make. That's life, okay? We state our opinions, we move on. This is my opinion. I do not like living in a place where they tell me what I can and can't do. And I believe she later retracted some of that and apologized for calling Michigan a dictatorship.
Yeah, I just, all those anti-freedom laws that Michigan has, like you can't drink and drive, and you have to wear a seat belt, and you can't go take other people's money or things and just go in their house and take what you want. I
Right.
just hate living under those terms of a dictatorship. She needs to grow up, and I'm
Right.
trying not to use language that I shouldn't use, but she needs to seriously grow up and face the fact that she might have to sacrifice a little bit of her lifestyle. And I'm sure it's really hard, living in the mansion that she lives in with
Right.
an athlete that makes millions of dollars. And it's always funny to me too. I would think that all the right wing propagandists would be out protesting her right now and saying that we don't need to hear from an athlete's wife, right? Because
Right.
when LeBron or Kaepernick or anybody else takes a political stance, then it's all about the athletes should just play, and we don't need to hear from their families. But I think it just comes from another point of privilege, and the fact that if you're at risk, stay at home. Well, I don't think she realizes that pretty much anybody 18 and above is at risk of getting sick and dying, because you're seeing people, even younger kids than that, are
Yep.
dying in some cases. By the way, just got a breaking news update that after a statewide audit, Georgia election officials have confirmed President-elect Biden's victory over Trump in Georgia. So,
Well, that was the, we were talking about that off air. We were wondering when that was going to be completed. That's the hand recount. Now, Mr. Trump is expected, and I don't think he can do it until they're certified. May be wrong on that, but he's expected to ask for another electronic recount. So I'm not sure what you're going to get out of an electronic recount that you didn't get out of the ballot by ballot hand recount. But
and I might note the ballot by ballot hand recount was done each ballot was counted at a table with a Republican and a Democrat sitting there and confirming each one of the votes, but paging Lindsey Graham on that one.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Folks that missed our last
yeah.
I was going to say, for folks that missed our last podcast, we talk about Mr. Graham and what he's done to try and help Mr. Trump suppress the vote. So you want to go back and catch our previous episode and watch that.
Yeah. So Holly Stafford, hey, maybe she should go try living in an actual dictatorship and see what it's like.
Right.
As opposed to a government like Michigan's that's trying their best to deal with the pandemic and balance the economy at the same time. I've said it all along, and I've said it since March. If we just would put a national mask mandate in place, if we'd have done it in March or April this year, our economy would be back open and stronger than ever now. And I do think, as close as this election was, that if Trump would have been an actual leader on COVID-19, he may have been able to pull it out.
Right.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. And I already mentioned him earlier, so I stole a little bit of the thunder. But let's talk about America's mayor.
Right.
The one, the only Rudolph, the black-haired red-eye-nosed reindeer from great state of New York, but I believe he was in Pennsylvania today having a legal. I don't really. Some people have called it a press conference, but what I've seen was more of a literal and figurative meltdown.
Right.
Why don't you tell us what happened?
Well, he he went into court and kind of got spanked a little bit, and then he came out and held a press conference, an hour-long press conference, and he started sweating, as you do when you're out in the heat and TV lights are on and that kind of stuff. And his hair dye started to run and gave him black dye sideburns on both sides of his face. And they stayed there for the better part of an hour.
Yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad he wasn't in Georgia protesting that vote, because it would have looked more like a Southern Baptist preacher, probably like you and I grew up with, G-Man.
Right.
Had the hair dye and the Grecian running down their face, but
Right.
at a hot church camp. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll give you credit for saying this, that you couldn't write some of this stuff
Right.
if you were trying to come up with like a comedy drama kind of thing about politics. Just the fact that you got this guy, this mayor who was wrapped up in the Borat movie, and a few years ago, I can remember in 2008. Wow, everybody was like, Giuliani's the man to beat for president. You remember that?
Yep.
He's gonna wipe. It was gonna be 2008 was gonna be Giuliani versus Hillary. That was going to be the election, and it was going to be a no holds barred. And of course, we know neither one of them won the nomination.
Right.
But Giuliani was just thought to be this upstanding guy, and all these things, and like 2 divorces later, and multiple lawsuits, and he just. I don't know anybody politically comparable to compare him to. Maybe the former prime minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, might be a good comparison. Standpoint of, he kept trying to make comebacks and just would embarrass himself. I think he got caught at a party with some prostitutes and those kinds of things. Berlusconi did, but just the comparison. I mean, just Giuliani's reputation just keeps going lower and lower and lower.
Yep, he's gone from America's mayor to America's laughingstock.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things they were saying in the press conference today, I mean, CNN has like a whole section of their site dedicated to fact checking Giuliani. I mean, he said, that in Pennsylvania, more than 600,000 ballots, quote, weren't inspected, which renders them ballots that are null and void. And the fact check shows this. That this is false. Nothing's illegitimate about those ballots. They didn't have to be inspected in the way that he said. He said mail-in ballots are prone to fraud. No election expert on either side of the aisle has ever validated that that's prone to fraud. He suggested Supreme Court Justice Alito intervened in Pennsylvania and told the state that any ballot that comes in after 8 o'clock on November 3rd had to be put aside and not opened. That's a false claim too. What Alito said was that they needed to follow the state attorney general's or secretary of state's plan, which called for separating those ballots, going ahead and counting them, but separating them in case there was a legal challenge so that those ballots could be counted. It's just one thing after the next. And, it reminds me of that old saying about legal arguments, which said that if the law, if you don't have the law, argue the facts.
Right.
If you don't have the facts, argue the law.
Right.
If you have neither the facts nor the law, hit your hands on the table really hard and flip it over.
Right.
Because it's just, they're just trying to make a spectacle of the whole thing. And again, like we talked about earlier, I think it's a delay tactic. The whole goal is if they could push these votes from being certified. But I don't see it happening. I mean, I know we'll know a lot tomorrow based on the meeting that happens in the White House and how he tries to strong arm those legislators. We'll see. But I mentioned this last night with Raffensperger, I think is that his name in Georgia?
Yeah, Georgia Secretary of State. Yeah.
Secretary of State in Georgia. I mean, I think that guy's up for a Profile and Courage Award from the JFK Library because
Yeah.
it would have been really easy for him to give in to his party, to give in to pressure, but he stood ground. I mean, and who would have thunk somebody in a Brian Kemp administration would have done that?
Yeah, to show some ethics and stand by him. It's definitely not what his boss would have. Well, I say his boss, his governor would have done. I mean, we know what shenanigans Brian Kemp did to get elected, basically disenfranchising at least 200,000 black people's vote that we know of, and it could even be more. I mean, like we said in the past, they basically stole the governorship from Stacey Abrams. So,
all right. Well, hey, that gets us pretty close to our time. And any last topics you want to cover, G-Man?
I guess there's Ivanka Trump's best friend, a lifelong friend since childhood. There's a story out about with her in Vanity Fair about her relationship with Ivanka and how she's not the person you see on TV. She's not this warm and fuzzy person, that she's portrayed as. She's pretty mean and vindictive, a lot like her dad. So if you get a chance, go read that.
Yeah, that sounds shocking.
Right. Oh, and then I guess Laura Trump.
That is true. I broke that news for you earlier.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know my wife's going to be really excited about this. Lara Trump, who is the wife of Eric Trump, and apparently has some kind of ties to the state of North Carolina, is reported to be mulling a U.S. Senate candidacy in 2022. So maybe there will be a Trump on the ballot in 2022.
Right.
Richard Burr is not going to run for re-election for that seat, and Democrats have viewed that one as a top pickup if they can find a candidate who doesn't espouse to be a family values person and then turns out not to be a family values person. So,
right.
Talking to you, Cal Cunningham.
Right. Yeah. Who, as you said, as you and I have talked before, not only did he screw over his wife, but he screwed over the rest of us because we would only need to win one of those Senate seats in Georgia, which I think is doable. Getting both of them, I think, is going to be a bit problematic, but not.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there because I think it's going to be 2-0 either way. I don't see anybody going in on a special election and saying, I'll vote for a Democrat and I'll vote for Republicans. I think passions are going to be so high. I think it's going to be 2-0. Either the Democrats win both or the Republicans win both. But
Well,
that's just me. We'll see.
We'll see on January 5th. So
that's exactly right. So all the folks in Georgia, be sure and get registered. I believe those who've already registered and requested absentee ballots have already started shipping. So it's going to be here before we know it. All eyes are going to be upon Georgia. And who would have thought that would have come down to a southern state? But the only place I really heard that mentioned was right here on the GD report when we talked about the Senate races. And we said, what if it came down to 2 runoffs in the state of Georgia?
Yep. Yeah, I think we've done a really good job of being on top of this thing. We called states early that the national media didn't call, and we were spot on. So
we talked about, on the early returns on Georgia too, we talked about the fact that we better hold off because there was a whole lot of Gwinnett and Fulton County to be counted.
Yep.
And I think there was a lot of people, even some of our guests on our show, I think both of our guests on our show kind of doubted us about that. Even the Democratic one and the Republican Trump supporter kind of doubted, both of them doubted us. And I had to step off the call that night, but we saw that it came true. So,
yep.
Well, hey, everybody, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening in and watching. And as always, as we said at the very first, be sure and send us your questions, your comments, your concerns, your emotional outbursts, anything like that. Let us know what's happening out there. If you'd like to be a guest, send us a note. We're open to having guests on from time to time as well, as you've seen. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, maybe it's something in your state or in your city, we'd be happy to jump on, do some research, and cover those. So,
Yeah.
man, thanks a lot. Have a good evening. Everybody stay safe and mask up when you go out.
Yep. Good night, everybody.